Thousands of missiles were pointed at us, ready to launch at a moment's notice. A few of us here will remember being taught in school in the event of a nuclear attack, remember to get down under your desk. I still remember the air raid siren that went off every weekday morning at 10:30 right across the street on top of the fire station across from where we live. It was a mechanical test, of course, but it was also a daily reminder that we believed that an atomic blast was a real and present danger. Surrounded by fear, and perhaps in spite of it, active citizens stood up to power. That's the story of the civil rights movement, of the so-called war on poverty, of the eventual opposition to the Vietnam War. The contributions of active citizens helped expand freedom for poor and black people, for women and other minorities, and to bring peace in the midst of a period of fear. America not only survived the Cold War, but won it, because Americans acted like true citizens. Active citizenship is essential to successful democracy. Active citizens, meaning well-educated, engaged in their own civic communities, steeped in the inherent optimism of the American experiment, have been critical to our progress over the years. We count on such citizens to approach problems not just with passion, but with reason and courage, to bring the power of reason to bear not just on their own issues, but on the issues that we face as a community. The role has deep roots in America. John Adams, one of our founders and a son of Massachusetts, as you know, took up the unpopular defense of British soldiers in 1770 in the wake of the so-called Boston Massacre. Despite outraged fellow colonists and the condemnation of such figures as Sam Adams and Paul Revere, John Adams successfully argued that the soldiers had acted in their own self-defense and won acquittals for all but two of them. His son, John Quincy Adams, another great statesman and lawyer, took up the unpopular defense of the African mutineers aboard the slave ship Amistad in 1841 and won their freedom. Now, of course, I suppose we'll never know whether it was the substance of his arguments or the length. He argued for 9 hours in front of the Supreme Court. But here again is another early example of an active citizen tempering the passion of the time with reason and with courage. The willingness to face down passion and fear with reason and courage, to speak truth to power, is the hallmark of the active citizen. It represents a deep and honorable tradition in our country. And I believe we are going to have to tap that tradition of citizenship again, because fear, as a device to manipulate and even to govern, is at large again in our times. The events of September 11, 2001 were horrific. You know that. They disrupted individual families and our collective sense of security and well-being. It was a wake-up call to our own vulnerability, and it represents a catastrophic failure of human understanding. Yet in its wake, we have, I believe, been governed by fear. Fear is what drove us to round up people of Arab descent, many of them American citizens, and to hold hundreds without cause or charge. Fear led us to lose focus on a known enemy in Afghanistan and invade Iraq instead. Fear justified what I believe to be the greatest assault on individual freedom in the Patriot Act and one of the greatest aggregations of presidential power in our history. Fear created the Guantanamo Detention Center and official justifications of torture, each of them undermining the very rule of law that has made our democracy the envy of the world. Last year, in a radio interview, a senior Pentagon official, Charles Cully Stimson, named some of the law firms providing free representation to the Guantanamo detainees and suggested that corporate America make those law firms, and I quote, choose between representing terrorists and representing reputable firms. He attempted to mark these lawyers as enemies of society. There was no subtlety in his message. Speaking about this post-9/11 phenomenon, former Vice President Gore observed that, quote, fear drives out reason. Fear suppresses the politics of discourse and opens the door to the politics of destruction. He quoted former Justice Brandeis, who said, "Men feared witches and burnt women." The former vice president captured the spirit of the active citizen in the heat of danger when he said, "The founders of our country faced dire threats. If they had failed in their endeavors, they would have been hanged as traitors. The very existence of our country was at risk. Yet in the teeth of those dangers, they insisted on establishing the Bill of Rights." Like me, he wonders, is our Congress today in any more danger than were their predecessors when the British Army was marching on the Capitol? Fear is a treacherous thing. The politics of fear is by no means limited to the area of national security. It is an increasingly favored political weapon to overcome a position that has reason and fairness on its side. When the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court announced 5 years ago its decision to recognize the right of gay men and women to marry, it upset a lot of people. It challenged a convention that a lot of us thought would be unchanged forever. But in effect, it simply reaffirmed the old principle that people come before their government as equals. It didn't compel any change in religious doctrine or church practice. It didn't require anyone personally to approve of such unions. It just said that consenting adults cannot be denied the same marriage license that I got. Yet there was a groundswell of opposition drummed up by the fear that this private freedom represented a threat to everybody else's marriage. Several years and many marriages later, the institution of marriage has thankfully survived in Massachusetts. And on the whole, the people of Massachusetts have moved on. But fear-mongering persists elsewhere in our country, and so do efforts to amend state laws to limit this civil right. Never mind that these are the same threats to civilization that were leveled 40 years ago in my lifetime when the United States Supreme Court struck down prohibitions on blacks marrying whites. In response to a surge in shootings in Boston, we filed legislation to limit the purchase of guns in Massachusetts to 1 gun per month, 12 guns a year. Yet, even in the wake of the tragedy at Virginia Tech, the gun lobby urges hunters and other law-abiding citizens to resist such measures as a threat to sport. Never mind that no one uses a semi-automatic to hunt birds, and law-abiding citizens rarely, if ever, buy guns in bulk. Taxes. Taxes are a favorite subject for the politics of fear. Everybody hates to pay taxes. And the incompetence of some government officials to steward public funds wisely makes for an easy target. In the wake of mismanagement of our Big Dig project, a brilliantly conceived but poorly executed road and tunnel that was supposed to cost $3 billion, it was a good idea, $3 billion, and ended up costing $15 billion plus interest, several anti-tax advocates in our state have sponsored a ballot initiative to eliminate the 5.25% state income tax. And their point is that government will never be efficient and accountable unless we starve it of your money. Never mind that it is also your broken roads and falling down bridges. Never mind that it is your overcrowded and underperforming schools. Never mind that it is your broken neighborhood and your broken neighbor, for that matter. That's all yours, too. We have 11.5 million undocumented people living and working in the United States today, fueling a broad underground economy. Most people understand that we need comprehensive immigration reform, something that provides both secure borders and fair rules for entry and treatment of undocumented people who are already here. Yet the whole national discourse is corrupted, in my view, by pundits who demonize families who in some cases have been contributing members of our communities for years as nothing more than sneaks and scofflaws.